If anybody opens this door, I'll play the recording for the entire company." The trembling voice echoed through the executive hallway on the 48th floor, sharp enough to silence 6 attorneys mid-sentence. Outside the locked boardroom, polished leather shoes shifted nervously across black marble while rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Manhattan. CEO Daniel Whitmore stood at the center of the chaos, jaw tight, silver tie slightly loosened for the first time all day. His daughter had locked herself inside the company's main conference room 37 minutes ago, and no one had been able to convince her to come out. "Sophia," one of the lawyers said carefully through the door, "you're upset right now. Let's calm down and talk." A loud crash exploded from inside the room. Glass shattered across the floor. Several assistants flinched. Daniel's expression darkened. "That was your mother's frame," Sophia cried from behind the door, her voice cracking with grief. "You told everyone she died protecting this company, but that's not true." Silence swept through the hallway like cold wind. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. The attorneys exchanged quick glances, each one silently calculating what disaster might unfold if investors, employees, or the press discovered the CEO's daughter was having a breakdown during merger week. Daniel stepped toward the door slowly, lowering his voice into the calm, controlled tone that had $1 billion negotiations. "Sophia, open the door." "No, you don't understand what you found." "Then explain why Mom was crying in the recording." Another silence. He looked down briefly, and for the first time all evening, uncertainty flickered across his face. At the far end of the hallway, Naomi Brooks quietly pushed a cleaning cart past the elevators. She almost kept walking. Almost. The wheels squeaked softly against the marble as she slowed near the boardroom entrance. She wasn't supposed to stop. Workers like her learned quickly in buildings like Whitmore Global. Stay invisible, keep your head down, never involve yourself in executive problems. But then she heard Sophia's voice. "Again, you lied to me about her." Naomi froze beside a gold-trimmed wall mirror, one hand still resting on the cart handle. The pain in that little girl's voice wasn't anger. It was betrayal. Deep, raw, lonely betrayal. Naomi knew that sound. 3 years earlier, she had heard almost the exact same pain inside a hospital room in Newark when her younger sister realized the doctors had hidden the truth about her condition. Some wounds didn't come from death itself. They came from silence. One attorney adjusted his cufflinks nervously. "Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we should call a behavioral specialist." "No psychiatrists," Sophia shouted immediately from inside. "I'm not crazy." Daniel rubbed his forehead hard enough to leave redness across his temple. Outside, thunder rolled low across the skyline, shaking the glass windows. Naomi glanced toward the locked boardroom door, then toward Daniel, then back again. Every instinct told her to walk away before someone noticed she had stopped working. But another sound reached her before she could move. Crying. Quiet now. Exhausted. The kind of crying someone does after they stop trying to be heard. Naomi swallowed slowly. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she stepped away from the cleaning cart and walked directly toward the cluster of attorneys surrounding the door. One of them immediately frowned. "Ma'am, this area is restricted." But Naomi's eyes stayed on Daniel Whitmore. Calm, steady, unafraid. "If you force that door open," she said softly, "your daughter will never trust you again." The attorneys looked at Naomi as if she had stepped into the wrong universe. One younger associate actually laughed under his breath before stopping himself when Daniel Whitmore raised a hand slightly. The hallway lights reflected off the dark glass walls surrounding the boardroom, turning every face pale and sharp against the storm outside. Naomi stood quietly in her navy housekeeping uniform, fingers still damp from glass cleaner, while men in $1,000 suits stared at her like she had forgotten her place. Daniel studied her carefully. "And why," he asked slowly, "would you think you understand my daughter better than professionals?" Naomi did not answer right away. She glanced toward the locked door. Another faint sound came from inside. Not yelling this time. Just movement. Restless pacing across hardwood floors. "Because," Naomi said softly, "people stop listening once children become inconvenient." The words landed harder than anyone expected. One attorney shifted uncomfortably. Another checked his phone just to avoid eye contact. Daniel's jaw tightened again, but something behind his eyes flickered. Recognition, maybe. Or guilt. Inside the room, Sophia's voice finally came again, quieter now. Who is that? Naomi stepped closer to the door. My name is Naomi. Silence. Then, are you another lawyer? No. Then why are you still standing there? Naomi looked down briefly at the small silver cross hanging from her necklace before answering. Because everybody else keeps trying to fix you instead of hearing you. Another long pause followed. The rain battered the windows harder now, water streaking down the glass like melting shadows over Manhattan. Somewhere far below, sirens echoed through the streets. Inside the hallway, nobody moved. Even the attorneys seemed unsure what came next. Naomi slowly crouched beside the door, careful and calm, keeping her voice low enough that only Sophia could fully hear it. I know what it feels like when adults hide the truth because they think pain will destroy you. Daniel's expression shifted instantly. His eyes narrowed slightly. Naomi could feel him watching her now, not like a maid, but like a variable he had not prepared for. What did your father tell you? Sophia asked from inside. Naomi swallowed gently. That my little sister was getting better. Her voice remained steady, but softer now. Every doctor smiled around her. Every grown-up spoke in whispers outside the room. They thought pretending everything was fine would protect her. The hallway became painfully quiet. Naomi could still remember the smell of hospital antiseptic, the flicker of fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning, the way her sister had looked at her after overhearing nurses in the hallway. Some memories never loosened their grip. Was she scared? Sophia whispered. Naomi closed her eyes for one brief second. No, she answered honestly. She was angry, because nobody trusted her enough to tell her the truth. Daniel exhaled sharply through his nose and turned away toward the windows. The city lights reflected across his face in fractured lines. For years he had controlled every interview, every lawsuit, every public statement connected to his company. But standing outside that locked room, none of his power seemed useful anymore. One attorney stepped toward him carefully. Sir, investors are still waiting downstairs. Daniel did not even look at him. Then let them wait. The attorney fell silent immediately. Behind the door, Sophia's footsteps slowly approached. Naomi could hear the hesitation in each step. Fear mixed with hope. My mom left a recording, Sophia said quietly. I found it hidden inside her desk last night. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. Naomi noticed it instantly. What did she say? Naomi asked gently. The answer did not come right away, only breathing. Then finally, in a trembling voice almost too soft to hear, Sophia whispered. She said Dad knew something terrible was happening inside the company before she died. The moment those words left Sophia's mouth, every sound in the hallway seemed to disappear beneath the storm outside. Daniel Whitmore stood completely still near the windows, one hand pressed against his mouth, while rainwater streaked down the glass behind him in silver lines. The attorneys looked at each other carefully, uncertain whether they should stay or quietly disappear before hearing something they were never meant to hear. Naomi remained crouched beside the door, her voice calm even though her heartbeat had started pounding harder inside her chest. Sophia, she asked gently, what exactly did your mother say? There was hesitation on the other side, then the faint click of the recorder turning in nervous hands. She sounded scared, Sophia whispered. Not sick, not confused. Scared. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Naomi noticed it immediately. Small reactions always revealed the truth before words did. She said if anything happened to her, I should never let the company bury the evidence. One attorney suddenly straightened. Sir, he interrupted carefully. Perhaps this conversation should happen privately. Daniel did not respond. His attention stayed locked on the door. The hallway lights reflected against the polished marble floors, cold and white, while thunder rolled low above Manhattan like distant drums. Naomi could almost feel the pressure building inside the room, without even seeing Sophia's face. 11 years old, carrying grief too heavy for a child and secrets too dangerous for an adult. What evidence? Naomi asked softly. Silence again. Then a shaky breath. I do not know. Sophia's voice cracked slightly. But Mom kept saying Dad waited too long to stop them. Daniel finally spoke. Sophia. His voice sounded lower now. Tired. Human. You are listening to something without context. Then tell me the context, she shouted back instantly. The sudden emotion echoed through the hallway, making one assistant near the elevators flinch. Everybody keeps treating me like I am too young to understand anything. Mom died almost a year ago, and nobody will even say her name out loud anymore. Naomi lowered her eyes for a moment. That sentence hit something deep inside her chest, because she remembered feeling the exact same anger after her sister passed away. People stopped speaking her name like silence could somehow soften grief. But silence only made the loneliness louder. Daniel stepped toward the door slowly. Your mother loved you very much. That is not an answer. His hand pressed flat against the glass beside the doorway. There were legal situations happening inside the company before she died. Did people get hurt? Sophia asked immediately. Daniel did not answer fast enough. Naomi saw it happen. Just 1 second of hesitation. But children noticed hesitation better than adults ever realized. Oh my God, Sophia whispered from inside. Something did happen. One attorney cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Whitmore, this discussion could expose the company to liability if overheard. Naomi slowly stood up from beside the door, then turned toward him for the first time. A little girl is crying behind that door, she said quietly. And you are still worried about the company. The attorney's face tightened with embarrassment, but he said nothing more. Daniel stared at Naomi in silence. Not angry this time. Something else. Something conflicted. Like he could not decide whether her words offended him or relieved him. Then suddenly a soft sound came from inside the boardroom. The lock shifted slightly. Naomi turned back toward the door just as it opened barely 2 inches. Through the narrow gap, one frightened brown eye appeared first. Sophia looked exhausted, her cheeks damp, dark curls falling messily around her face. In her trembling hands was a silver voice recorder no bigger than a cell phone. She looked directly at Naomi, not her father. If I let you inside, she whispered, will you promise not to lie to me like everybody else? Naomi looked into Sophia's frightened eyes through the narrow opening and answered without hesitation. I promise I will not lie to you. For a second, nobody in the hallway moved. The rain outside softened slightly, turning into a steady rhythm against the towering glass windows while the city lights shimmered below like blurred gold beneath water. Then the door opened another few inches, just enough for Naomi to slip through. One attorney stepped forward immediately. Sir, this is inappropriate. Daniel raised his hand without looking away from the door. Everybody stays here. His voice carried the same authority that built his empire, but underneath it was exhaustion now, raw and visible. Naomi carefully entered the boardroom, and the door closed softly behind her. The room smelled faintly of expensive coffee, polished oak, and shattered glass. Framed family photographs lay broken across the floor near the far wall. One picture had landed face down beside the conference table, its cracked frame reflecting the dim ceiling lights. Sophia sat curled beneath the massive screen used for investor meetings, her knees pulled tightly against her chest. The silver recorder rested in her trembling hands. Her cheeks were damp, but her eyes looked older than 11 years old. Naomi stayed near the door at first, giving the girl space. Everybody out. There thinks I am being dramatic, Sophia whispered. Naomi shook her head gently. No, they think you are dangerous. Sophia looked up quickly. Dangerous? Because truth makes powerful people nervous. The little girl stared at her in silence. Naomi slowly crossed the room and crouched a few feet away, careful not to invade her space. Outside the glass walls of the boardroom, silhouettes of attorneys shifted nervously in the hallway, watching like shadows through smoke. My father keeps saying Mom died in an accident, Sophia said quietly. But she sounded terrified in the recording. Naomi nodded once. Fear leaves fingerprints in a voice. You can hear it when someone is trying to stay strong for somebody else. Sophia looked down at the recorder. Her thumb brushed across the worn play button over and over. Do you think my dad is a bad person? Naomi did not answer immediately. That question carried too much weight for a careless response. She glanced toward the hallway where Daniel's silhouette stood rigid beyond the frosted glass. Then back at Sophia. I think grief makes people hide parts of themselves, she said softly. Especially when guilt is involved. Sophia's breathing slowed slightly. For the first time since Naomi entered the room, the panic in her eyes eased just a little. Mom used to bring me here after school, she whispered. She said this company mattered because it helped people. Her eyes drifted toward the massive city skyline outside. But lately they fought all the time. I heard her crying in Dad's office 3 nights before she died. Naomi listened quietly. No interruptions. No therapy language. just presence. Sometimes people needed witnesses more than answers. Sophia reached into the pocket of her oversized sweatshirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges worn from being opened too many times. I found this hidden inside Mom's desk with the recorder. Naomi carefully accepted it. The paper trembled slightly in her fingers as she unfolded it beneath the dim conference lights. It was not a letter. It was a list. Dates, names, company departments, legal settlements. Several lines highlighted in yellow marker. At the bottom, written quickly in blue ink, were 7 words that made Naomi's stomach tighten instantly. If anything happens to me, trust nobody inside Whitmore Global. Naomi slowly looked back up at Sophia. Before she could speak, the boardroom door suddenly rattled hard from outside. One attorney's tense voice broke through the silence. "Mr. Whitmore, the press just arrived downstairs." The words from outside the boardroom seemed to change the air instantly. Press, reporters, cameras. Naomi watched the fear return to Sophia's face the moment she heard it. The little girl clutched the recorder tighter against her chest and shook her head quickly. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. They cannot hear this." Naomi moved carefully closer. Sophia breathed, but the child was already spiraling again, her breathing uneven, eyes darting toward the glass walls surrounding the conference room. Outside, silhouettes shifted rapidly through the hallway as security personnel began arriving near the elevators. The building suddenly felt smaller, tighter, as though the entire tower itself knew something dangerous was trying to surface. Daniel opened the boardroom door halfway and stepped inside alone. The moment Sophia saw him, she backed away across the carpet. "Do not come near me." His face tightened at the words. Naomi noticed how tired he looked now. Not like a billionaire executive. Not like the polished man from magazine covers downstairs in the lobby. Just a father losing control of everything at once. "Sophia," he said carefully, "the media cannot know about this tonight." "Why?" she snapped immediately. "Because they will ask questions you do not understand. Then explain them." Her voice cracked again, louder this time. "You keep saying I do not understand anything, but Mom trusted me enough to leave this for me." She held up the recorder with trembling hands. Daniel stared at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Naomi stood slowly between them, not to block either one, but to slow the collision happening in front of her. "This is not about the company anymore," she said quietly. Daniel's eyes shifted toward her. "You do not know what this is about." Naomi did not look away. "Then tell her the truth before somebody else does." The room fell silent except for rain tapping softly against the windows. Somewhere below 48 floors of steel and glass, camera flashes flickered through the streets outside Whitmore Global Tower. Daniel loosened his tie completely now, the silk hanging unevenly against his collar. Tiny details always revealed when powerful men were unraveling. "Your mother found documents tied to a pharmaceutical division inside the company," he said finally, his voice rougher now. Sophia stared at him without blinking. Naomi remained still beside the conference table, listening carefully. There were reports about side effects from a medication rollout 2 years ago. Internal complaints. Legal settlements. Sophia swallowed hard. People got hurt. Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. "Yes." The word barely came out. The little girl looked like the floor beneath her had vanished. "And Mom wanted to expose it?" Another silence. Then Daniel nodded once. "Your mother believed the board waited too long to act." Naomi felt tension spread through the room instantly. Not because of the confession itself, but because of what came after it. Daniel's voice softened almost to a whisper. But she also knew going public could destroy thousands of jobs and collapse the company overnight. Sophia's eyes filled again. "So what did you do?" Daniel looked toward the windows instead of answering. That was answer enough. Naomi saw it happen in Sophia's face immediately. The realization. The heartbreak. "You chose the company," she whispered. Daniel turned sharply. "I was trying to prevent chaos. Mom died thinking nobody listened to her." The words hit harder than yelling ever could. Daniel's face tightened with pain. He could no longer hide behind polished speeches or legal teams. Naomi glanced down at the cracked family photo still lying on the floor beside her shoe. Elena Whitmore's smiling face stared upward through fractured glass. A woman frozen forever before everything broke apart. Then suddenly Sophia extended the recorder toward Naomi instead of her father. "You listen to it," she whispered. Because I think you are the only person in this building who still cares more about people than power. Naomi stared at the small silver recorder resting in Sophia's shaking hands while thunder rolled softly beyond the glass walls of the tower. For a moment, nobody moved. Daniel Whitmore stood near the conference table with both hands braced against the polished wood, his head lowered slightly, as if the weight of the room had finally become too heavy to carry upright. The city below continued glowing through sheets of rain, completely unaware that one family was quietly falling apart 48 floors above Manhattan. Naomi accepted the recorder carefully, almost gently, like it contained something fragile enough to break twice. Sophia watched her with exhausted eyes. I could not listen to the whole thing, she admitted softly. Every time Mom started crying, I stopped it. Naomi nodded in understanding. Some truths arrived slowly because the heart could only survive them in pieces. She pressed the play button. Static crackled softly through the boardroom speakers. Then a woman's voice filled the room. Calm at first, controlled, but underneath it lived fear. Real fear. If you are hearing this, Sophia, it means I ran out of time. Daniel shut his eyes immediately. Naomi glanced toward him, but said nothing. Elena Whitmore's voice continued through the quiet room, trembling slightly now. I wanted to believe your father would stop them before things got worse. I truly did. Sophia curled tighter against herself beneath the projector screen. Her breathing became uneven again, but Naomi remained beside her, steady and silent. People trusted this company, Elena continued. Families trusted us with their health. And when reports started coming in about the medication side effects, I begged the board to pull everything immediately. A long pause crackled through the speaker. Then came the sound of Elena crying softly before she spoke again. But money makes people hesitate when they should act. Daniel's shoulders tightened visibly. Naomi could almost feel the shame radiating from him across the room. Outside the boardroom, the hallway had gone completely silent now. Even the attorneys no longer interrupted. Everyone was listening. Elena's voice grew quieter, more tired. Your father is not evil, Sophia. That is what makes this harder. He convinced himself he was protecting employees, shareholders, thousands of innocent people connected to the company. Daniel slowly lowered into one of the leather chairs near the conference table, staring blankly at the marble floor beneath him. But when powerful people delay the truth, Elena whispered through the recorder, someone weaker always pays the price. Sophia covered her mouth instantly as tears spilled down her cheeks. Naomi reached over carefully and placed a hand against the girl's shoulder. No speeches, no forced comfort, just warmth. Elena inhaled shakily on the recording. If anything happens to me, I need you to remember something your father forgot. The room felt frozen now. Even the rain seemed quieter. A company can recover from scandal, Elena said softly. But people do not recover from being abandoned. The recording ended with a click. Silence swallowed the room completely. Naomi slowly lowered the recorder into her lap. Daniel remained motionless at the conference table, his eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the windows. The billionaire CEO who controlled courtrooms, mergers, politicians, and headlines suddenly looked like a man standing alone in the ruins of his own choices. Sophia finally looked toward him again. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mom was trying to save people. Daniel nodded once, slowly, painfully. Yes. And you stopped her. He swallowed hard before answering. I asked her to wait. The little girl's face crumpled again. Naomi could feel the heartbreak spreading through the room like cold water. But then Sophia asked the question nobody outside those walls would have dared ask Daniel Whitmore. How many people got hurt while everybody waited? Daniel did not answer right away. The silence after Sophia's question stretched painfully across the boardroom while rain slid down the windows in slow silver streams. Naomi watched him carefully from beside the projector screen. His hands rested against the edge of the conference table now, fingers tense, knuckles pale. Beneath the dim overhead lights, outside the glass walls, the attorneys stood completely still. Nobody checked their phones anymore. Nobody whispered. For the first time in years, the truth inside Whitmore Global had become heavier than the company itself. Sophia looked at her father again, eyes swollen from crying but steady now. How many people? She repeated softly. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose before finally speaking. 32 confirmed hospitalizations tied directly to the medication. Sophia's face drained of color. Naomi felt the air shift instantly. And 3 deaths still under investigation, Daniel added quietly. The words landed like falling stone. Even the attorneys outside lowered their eyes. Sophia stared at him in disbelief. Mom knew. Daniel nodded once. Yes. And you still let them keep selling it? His face tightened sharply. It was more complicated than that. No, Sophia whispered. You just wanted more time. Daniel looked away toward the skyline. Somewhere below, Manhattan traffic crawled through rain and neon while reporters gathered outside the tower entrance, completely unaware of the confession unfolding above them. Naomi stepped slowly toward the conference table. What happened after Elena threatened to expose everything? She asked carefully. Daniel's jaw flexed. For a moment, Naomi thought he would refuse to answer. But then something inside him finally seemed to collapse beneath the weight of the room. The board panicked, he admitted. Investors were already nervous. We had lawsuits forming in 3 states. If the story broke publicly before we stabilized things, thousands of employees could have lost their jobs within weeks. Sophia shook her head immediately. Mom did not care about stock prices. Daniel's voice cracked slightly for the first time. Your mother cared about people. That was the problem. Silence filled the room again. Naomi looked down at the broken family photograph near her feet. Elena's smiling face reflected faintly through fractured glass, while thunder rolled somewhere far over the Hudson River. 3 nights before she died, Daniel continued quietly. Elena told me she was going to leak the internal reports herself if the board refused to act. Sophia's breathing grew uneven again. And then she died in a car accident. Daniel shut his eyes. Yes. Naomi studied him carefully. Something about his answer felt incomplete. Not false, but unfinished. Sophia seemed to feel it too. You still are not telling me everything. Daniel slowly opened his eyes again. Pain sat openly across his face now. Impossible to hide behind executive calm anymore. Because there is more. Naomi felt tension tighten through the room instantly. Outside the boardroom, one of the attorneys shifted nervously near the door. Daniel noticed it, then looked directly at Naomi instead. The night Elena died, he said quietly, she was not driving to the police. Sophia frowned slightly. Then where was she going? Daniel hesitated again. Too long. Naomi could almost hear her own heartbeat. Finally, he answered in a voice barely above a whisper. She was going to meet someone inside this building. The room froze. Sophia stared at him. Who? Daniel looked toward the glass walls where the attorneys stood outside like trapped ghosts beneath fluorescent light. Then his eyes stopped on one man near the back. Senior legal advisor Martin Keller. Gray suit. Silver watch. Calm expression. Too calm. Naomi noticed immediately. Daniel's voice dropped lower. The person who convinced the board to delay the recalls. Martin Keller's face lost all color. Sophia looked between them in confusion. Naomi turned slowly toward the hallway, just as Keller took one careful step backward away from the boardroom door. Martin Keller forced a small smile the moment everyone looked at him, but the confidence behind it had vanished. Naomi noticed his hand tighten around the leather folder tucked beneath his arm, while rainwater shimmered against the hallway windows behind him. The senior legal advisor who had spent 20 years protecting Whitmore Global suddenly looked less like a powerful attorney and more like a man calculating exits. Daniel, Keller said carefully, his voice calm but thinner now. This is not the place for accusations. Sophia stared through the glass wall at him. You knew my mom? Keller adjusted his tie slowly. I worked closely with her, yes. Daniel pushed himself upright from the conference table, exhaustion hardening into something colder. You manipulated the board into delaying the recalls. Keller's expression tightened. I advised caution during an unstable financial situation. People died, Sophia whispered. The words sliced through the room sharper than shouting. Keller looked toward her with practiced sympathy. Sophia, the situation was far more complicated than you understand. Naomi saw the little girl's shoulders tense instantly at the sentence. The same sentence adults always used when they wanted children quiet. She stepped slightly closer beside Sophia. Then explain it simply, Naomi said calmly. Keller's eyes shifted toward her. For the first time that night, real irritation surfaced across his face. And you are. Naomi held his stare without blinking. The only person in this building who listened before speaking. The hallway outside became painfully still. Even the attorneys standing behind Keller avoided eye contact now. Daniel walked slowly toward the boardroom door. Elena told me 2 weeks before she died that Keller was burying internal reports before regulators could review them. Keller laughed once under his breath. Forced. Nervous. You cannot seriously believe I acted alone in protecting this company. The moment the words escaped, the silence changed completely. Sophia looked up sharply. Naomi saw it happen instantly in Daniel's face too. Regret. Because Keller had admitted more than intended. Protecting the company, Daniel repeated quietly. Not protecting patients. Keller's composure finally cracked. Do you think investors would have survived a public collapse? Do you think 20,000 employees deserve to lose their jobs because Elena wanted moral perfection? His voice echoed through the hallway louder now, frustration bleeding through years of corporate polish. The recalls would have destroyed Whitmore Global overnight. Sophia's eyes filled again. So my mom was right. Keller's mouth tightened. Daniel looked at him with quiet disbelief. She begged us to stop everything before more. People got hurt. And I told her panic would create more victims. Keller snapped back. Naomi noticed several attorneys slowly stepping farther away from him now, like people sensing a building beginning to crack beneath them. Thunder rolled outside again, deeper this time, rattling faintly through the glass walls of the tower. Sophia suddenly stood up from the floor, clutching the recorder tightly against her chest. Her voice trembled, but not from fear anymore. Did my mom die because she was going to expose all of you? The question hit the hallway like ice water. Keller stared at her silently for one dangerous second too long. Then he shook his head quickly. Absolutely not. But Naomi noticed it. That flicker in his eyes. Tiny. Fast. Guilty. Daniel noticed it too. His face drained slowly of color. Martin, he said quietly, what are you not telling me? Keller looked toward the elevators where security officers now stood beside the growing crowd of employees gathering at the end of the hallway. Camera flashes from the street below flickered faintly against the windows. Pressure was closing in from every direction now. Elena was not supposed to release those files that night, Keller admitted carefully. I only wanted time to contain the damage. Daniel stepped closer to the glass door. What did you do? Keller swallowed hard. Then finally, almost too quietly to hear, he answered. I told someone to follow her after she left the building. The confession seemed to drain all warmth from the 48th floor. Nobody spoke after Keller's words. Rain slid slowly down the massive windows while distant sirens echoed through the streets below, faint and hollow beneath the storm. Sophia stood frozen beside Naomi, the silver recorder pressed tightly against her chest, her small fingers trembling against the metal edges. Daniel Whitmore stared through the glass wall at Martin Keller like he was looking at a stranger for the first time in 20 years. You told someone to follow my wife? He repeated quietly. Keller lifted both hands slightly, panic beginning to surface beneath his polished composure. Daniel, listen to me carefully. I never wanted Elena harmed. Then why was she being followed? Daniel's voice rose for the first time all night, sharp enough to make several attorneys near the elevators step back instinctively. Keller swallowed hard. Because she had copies of confidential files. If regulators received those documents before we controlled the narrative, Whitmore Global would have collapsed instantly. Sophia looked between the two men with tears streaming silently down her face. My mom was trying to save people. Keller's eyes flickered toward her briefly, but he could not hold her gaze. Naomi noticed that too. Shame always avoided eye contact. Daniel slowly opened the boardroom door and stepped into the hallway. The attorneys parted immediately, creating space around him like frightened water. He stopped only a few feet from Keller. Did the board know you had Elena followed? Keller hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. Daniel's expression changed completely then. Not anger anymore. Something heavier. Devastation. My God, he whispered. I built this. Outside, camera flashes reflected against the rain-covered windows in quick bursts of white light. Security guards moved nervously near the elevators while employees whispered in tight circles farther down the hall. The truth was spreading now, even before words fully caught up to it. Naomi remained beside Sophia inside the boardroom. The little girl leaned against her quietly, exhausted from carrying grief too large for someone her age. Naomi gently brushed curls away from Sophia's damp forehead. Your mother was brave, she whispered softly. Sophia looked up at her. Then why does bravery hurt everyone? Naomi felt the weight of the question settle deep inside her chest. She thought about hospital hallways, funeral flowers, empty apartments after loss. Some kinds of courage always arrived carrying pain with them. Because truth changes things, Naomi answered carefully. And change scares people who built their lives around silence. Sophia looked down at the recorder again. Then slowly, for the first time all night, she reached for her father. Just one small hand extended through the brokenness between them. Daniel saw it. Instantly, his entire face collapsed with emotion as he crossed back into the boardroom. He knelt in front of her carefully, expensive suit pressing against shattered glass scattered across the floor. "I am sorry," he whispered. No speeches, no legal language, no billionaire confidence. Just a father finally stripped bare in front of his child. Sophia's lip trembled. "You chose the company over Mom." Daniel lowered his head. "Yes." The honesty hurt more than denial ever could. Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks again, but this time she did not pull away when Daniel gently held her hand. Outside the windows, dawn had started bleeding faint silver into the edge of the skyline. The storm was finally weakening. Naomi quietly stepped back toward the doorway, giving them space. Daniel looked up at her then, eyes red, voice unsteady. "Why did you help us after hearing all this?" Naomi glanced once toward Elena's cracked photograph lying near the conference table, then back at Sophia. "Because children should never have to carry adult guilt alone." The room fell quiet again. Soft, heavy, honest. As the first light of morning spread across Manhattan, Sophia leaned slowly against her father's shoulder for the first time since her mother died, and Daniel closed his eyes like a man realizing too late that power had never been the thing his family needed most.